Come gather, young people, wherever you roam. How's that?
Pretty damn good. You should be on the circuit.
I'm on the circuit. We're on YouTube. We're live. Tonight, the third Republican debate. Last night, election night in America. A lot's happening, Dad.
There sure is.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So, you all know, even if you're new, you've probably heard me say this. Forget the polls. Forget the pundits. Keep your eye on the big picture. And we saw the big picture yesterday. You know, all of the pundits and pollsters were saying the Democrats have to push the panic button. Joe Biden's brand is so toxic, so horrible. It's going to bring down the entire party. They need a reset. And what happened, Sam? Democrats had one of the greatest off-year election nights in history.
You didn't let me answer. You said, Sam, what happened? And then you just
Well, you know, you snooze, you lose.
Okay.
You better be quick on this.
Look into the camera.
You better be quick. So let's start with Kentucky. Blood red Kentucky, right? That Donald Trump won in double digits. The Democratic incumbent governor not only won re-election, he won it going away. It wasn't a squeaker. He won it by 5 percentage points. Then shift to another red state, Ohio. On the ballot is abortion rights, and Republicans have done their level best to try to muck up, confuse, muddle this issue. The voters weren't buying it. Not only did the abortion rights referendum win in Ohio, it won in a landslide, 13 percentage points. So too did the legalization of marijuana win in Ohio. And the win for abortion rights in Ohio was not the only red state where abortion rights won. Kansas, Kentucky, and others as well. And Republicans just backpedaling, you know, faster than an NFL cornerback, trying to figure out what are they going to do about this critical abortion issue. Then move to Virginia. You know, the rising Republican star there, Governor Youngkin. Some Republicans were touting him as the savior of the party, that he'd make a late run for the presidency. You know, he was kind of MAGA with a friendly face. And what happened? A pie hit him right in the face.
No, it didn't. I never saw that.
You never saw that. You didn't see the pie.
I never saw a single pie.
It's a virtual pie. You know, we're in the age of virtual reality.
Can I talk back against all this Democrat stuff?
Let me finish.
Oh, okay.
Finish Virginia. The Democrats
I think
flipped
people know what happened.
the House and sustained the Senate. And here are a couple of things you might not know. They tried to make gains in the state legislature in New Jersey, the Republicans. Just the opposite. Democrats made gains. And in school board elections, which are really important because education's a hot issue, Trump-backed MAGA candidates took a pasting as well.
Okay, so here's what I want to say to rain on the Democrats' parade. Trump is an entity in and of himself. So even though Dems did great last night, Trump defies all odds. He defies all polls. He defies all trends. He is his own wave. What do you say to that?
I think that's absolutely right, but it's not clear whether or not that's a toxic wave. Let's not forget, after his squeaker victory, which we know who predicted correctly in 2016, Trump and Trump-endorsed candidates have lost every election since 2018, 2020, 2022, and now 2023. So whatever Trump is selling isn't working. Now, what about Trump himself on the ballot? That's still a huge unknown. See, the dog thinks so too. He is about to face a very serious criminal trial on election, trying to overturn the election, with multiple felony counts, with a very tough judge and a very tough prosecutor in New York. I predict he will be convicted and sentenced to prison, and that will shake up everything.
We have a few questions for you here, Dad.
Sure. Any from the dog?
No, well, I don't know if he was asking a question.
Yeah.
Mike D. Nicola. Mike DiNicola says,
right.
"Hey, Allan, I know the Dems would lose the no primary and incumbent running keys, but Biden is in such serious trouble that I fear Democrats are underdogs either way. Any thoughts?"
Well, that's the conventional wisdom, and I don't fault you because that's what we're all hearing. What you haven't heard on these polls that's showing Biden in so much trouble is polls a year out have what kind of predictive value, Sam? 0. I remind you, Jimmy Carter was up 30 points on Ronald Reagan a year out. Wound up losing by 10.
All right, do you have any other examples? Because you use that all the time. Give us another example.
George H.W. Bush, down by 18 points to Mike Dukakis 6 months before the election. Won by about 6 points, a 25-point swing at various points. In 2012, it looked like Barack Obama was going to lose to Mitt Romney. Even the last Gallup poll, right before the election, had Mitt Romney ahead and Biden won going away.
You mean Obama?
Excuse me, Obama.
Good thing I'm here, man.
Good thing you're here. You're young and sharp. Catch my dyslexia.
My name is Ben with their first super chat. Thank you, sir.
Nice.
Or ma'am. Or I don't know. I'm assuming Ben is a man. They say, this is a little bit of a grim question for you. They say, I fear of extremists and fears of Biden-Harris being assassinated. What would happen if Joe Biden was killed or both him and VP at the same time?
Oh, God. You want me to
That's pretty grim.
descend into the pit on that one? It's such a grim question.
There is a line of succession to become president, right?
Yeah, I hate to tell you who would become president. Do you know, Sam?
Yeah, Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson, the MAGA Republican Speaker of the House.
Maybe he's asking about who would run in that case.
Oh, God, who knows? I mean, it would be wide open for the Democrats. Maybe your boss. Who's your boss?
Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg. He was a pretty attractive candidate last time. Maybe, what's the guy's name down there in Texas? You know the guy, I mean. Beto O'Rourke.
No,
who knows? You know who my guy is, Cory Booker.
Yeah. Captain M90's asked,
All right, one of our captains.
Yes. Lots of Dem politicians and liberals are pushing Biden to drop out. Bill Maher is one of the most vocal ones. Can you persuade them that Biden must run? He's trying.
I'm trying.
I don't think you have a direct line to Bill Maher, though.
I've been on the Bill Maher show, and he knows about the keys. He seems to have forgotten them. I've got to get back on his show and remind him. I was just on Scripps Howard last night, their show, screaming at the Democrats, saying, you have a death wish. You want to knock Biden out and lose 2 keys and give Donald Trump or whoever the Republican nominee might happen to be? That's absolute insanity. It is, again, succumbing to the conventional wisdom that's always wrong. Remember, the conventional wisdom said we have all these electable candidates, these experienced, great candidates like Al Gore, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, and Sam, what happened to all of them?
Womp womp.
They all lost.
Now, I was about to say something. I was going to say, even if you're not familiar with the keys, even if you don't subscribe to the keys, incumbency in politics is such an advantage. It seems odd that so many people who know politics so well are saying Biden shouldn't run, because incumbency, again, is one of the most powerful things that everybody knows is key to political victory and political power.
Absolutely right.
Strange.
The two almost 100% predictors, not quite, are open seat, which is absolutely toxic for the party holding the White House, and an internal party fight, which you would get if Biden didn't run. The White House party 90% of the time loses under those circumstances, almost never wins. Look at just some recent examples. 2016, 2008 are prime examples of open seats with primary battles, and Democrats losing in 2016, Republicans losing in 2008.
President Belichick, one of our many presidents in the chat,
yes,
says,
indeed.
I use the keys in my U.S. history classes, and my students love it. When the 2024 edition comes out, we'll include the updated analysis of 16 and 20.
Yes.
There you go.
Thank you for using it. It's being used a lot now, and it really is the only user-friendly prediction system. You know, all these complicated equations. This is something, not only does it teach you about politics, but it teaches you about history, because you have to look at history to answer the questions that are posed by the keys.
Here's a good question from RSocor01. How is the abortion issue affecting the keys?
It doesn't directly affect the keys in truth, but, you know, it is part of the policy change. You know, Biden's pro-choice position contrasts with that of Donald Trump. But I have to say, it is of critical importance in every election below the presidency. Even though it might not move the keys, it does affect Congress, Senate, even state houses. And we've seen Republicans have no answer on the abortion issue because there isn't an answer. It isn't like, oh, we just got to find the answer. It's not there because the American people do not want the government telling women how to control their reproductive lives. And, you know, what is the party that always says we're the party of limited government and personal freedom? And in trying to impose a national abortion ban, that would be the biggest government program in history and the biggest intrusion in the personal freedom of the American people. There is no answer for the Republicans on this issue. And as you know, your mom, you know, was an early on pro-choice activist who codified Roe versus Wade in Maryland right around the time you were born, some 30 years ago. And right after Dobbs, what did she tell us? The abortion issue is going to be the critical issue in upcoming elections.
So, yeah, big win in review, big win for Democrats last night. But we also are seeing, again, a lot's happening. The Trump organization trial going on. And I believe Trump, since we've last streamed, Trump Jr., and Ivanka have now testified. Thoughts, Dad?
Yeah. You know, a couple of centuries ago, scientists disproved the widespread theory of spontaneous generation that, you know, like maggots sprung out of nowhere. Now, in the Trump trial, suddenly spontaneous generation has reemerged. That is, all of these financial statements by which the Trump organization got all these loans spontaneously generated. If you listen to the testimony of Trump, of his 3 kids, no one is responsible. They just came out of thin air. And certainly the accountants couldn't do it. The accountants don't measure and evaluate the underlying properties. They just deal with the numbers that they are given. But these numbers somehow sprung out of nowhere. It's not going to fly. Trump is going to lose his business in New York. He's going to be fined hundreds of millions of dollars. Not one word out of Trump, Don Jr., Eric, or Ivanka, not one word that they said helps them avoid liability and penalty. Not one word.
They all seem to say, oh, I do not recall.
I don't recall.
Oh, I don't recall.
Ivanka recalls all these fine details, the name of the architect, you know, where the lighting was placed. But when it came to the most important thing, the financing, I don't recall a thing.
Oh, I don't recall.
Sergeant Schultz, you know, from Hogan's Heroes. I know nothing. I see nothing. I recall nothing.
My name is Ben says, should the Constitution be amended so the line of succession to the presidency stays within the administration?
I think so.
Really?
I think, yeah. It's not going to happen.
He also says
it's not constitutional. It would just require a statute. The Constitution only establishes the vice president as in succession. The rest is actually by statute. So it could be changed by law, and I think it should. It would be a tragedy of epic proportions for Mike Johnson, you know, this extreme MAGA Republican, to become president if something happened to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Ryan on Wheels asks, Allan, what do you think about Bashir as a future presidential/VP candidate?
Absolutely. You know, I think, you know, he's a very attractive candidate. You know, he's not the most progressive, but he's certainly progressive enough for Democrats, but he's able to sell that in Kentucky. He's smart. He's attractive. Absolutely, look for him in 2028.
Alec Shim, thank you for the $10. Joe Biden will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping next Wednesday at the APEC summit. What agreements or policies could be made that would affect some of the 13 keys to fall in Biden's favor?
Well, any kind of big treaty between the U.S. and China that recognized the existence of Taiwan and averted a possible invasion, that would...
But no shot that's going to happen.
No shot. But
yeah.
Yes, what it would take.
Okay.
And that's what it would take, and no shot. I agree. But stranger things have happened. Although I can't recall when.
Andrew asks, if a recession is not declared in the middle of 2024, will that automatically turn the short-term key true?
Well, the way it works is, is the key going to turn negative? And unless there's an acknowledged recession in the election year, no, the key stays true. That's right.
Joe Lee asks, hello, Professor. I have an exam tomorrow. Should I study right now?
No, you should listen to us. We'll give you more information than you'll get from studying.
Ask us a question, Joe, about your topic, and we'll try to answer it here.
Absolutely. As long as it's not about opera. I won't answer questions about opera.
The Alex Treefire asks, can Bashir win McConnell's Senate seat, especially if McConnell retires?
Run that by... Yes, I think it's if he wants to, but being a governor is a good springing stone to the presidency, generally better than the Senate. But yeah, he'd be a formidable candidate for the McConnell seat.
Rusty J asks, hello, Professor Lichtman. Thank you for mentioning some details about the predictive power of the incumbency key and the uncontest primary key. Are there any other keys that have an increased weight value?
Well, I don't weight the keys because, when you try to weight keys, you make errors because weights change. That's why most prediction systems don't work, because they have these fixed weights and they don't take into account that in the future weights can change unpredictably. But what the keys often do have is trigger effects. So, for example, the recession key, it's just one key, but it can have trigger effects, producing social unrest, for example, often accompanies economic problems, or it can produce a contest within the incumbent party nomination. So keys can trigger things, just like, the recession key was triggered by the Great Depression, obviously, of 1932, which also triggered social unrest, got a charismatic candidate, Franklin Roosevelt, to come out. So yes, keys can affect other keys.
We must have a new person in the chat. Another outlier says, what are y'all talking about when you talk about the keys? I guess people might come in here and not know what the keys are. I would say best resource is just Wikipedia. There's a good Wikipedia page on the keys.
I'll give them a better resource. Buy my book.
Or you could buy the book.
Predicting the next president.
If you want like a quick,
White House.
Yeah, if you want like a quick thing about what do the keys mean, you can just look it up online.
Wikipedia, or just Google it. You'll get thousands of references.
George Miller says, Allan, please debate Kalayan Noir about gun control and the Second Amendment. Do you know who that is?
I'm ready to debate anyone, anytime about gun control and the Second Amendment. But, you want my arguments? Again, read my book. Repeal the Second Amendment, the case for a safer America. No matter what they ask, I've got a book,
Yeah. People are saying it would be a great idea if we added interviews/debates in the future. That sounds like a good idea.
That's not a bad idea if we can, get people to agree to that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can. I mean,
yeah, I don't mind. I'm always ready to debate. The audience may not know I was a intercollegiate debater, New York, New England debate champion, then coach at Brandeis University and Harvard University.
Olive Bay's Gimel Dollar.
What's the school that's really solid? Brandeis.
Brandeis.
Yay.
All right. Biggest foreign, policy failure since 1860. Vietnam in 68, question mark?
That's right up there.
What's number 2?
Yeah, that's a foreign military failure, not
Policy, right?
not
I
the
guess you mean
policy key,
foreign
but
failure.
that's
Yeah.
certainly way up there.
What else? What are the big? I mean, Iraq was a pretty big.
Iraq was another, really bad failure. The crossing the 38th parallel into Korea and bringing on the Chinese and creating this basically, a corridor of death that just didn't go anywhere and stalemated. That was another very bad foreign policy failure.
Matt Sheridan wants to know, off topic, did you guys like the new Beatles song? Did you listen to it?
I didn't. Did you?
I did. I thought it was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I'll have to listen to it. Yeah. I've been a little busy.
We are officially 10 minutes out from the debate. So in 10 minutes, we will be watching the debate. The chat will be, I'll be not really watching the chat, just so everybody knows.
And I'll be commenting on the debate in real time. But let me set the table here.
Yeah, set it.
Set it. We're down to 5, right? Can you name them?
Christie, Scott, Ramaswamy, Haley, DeSantis.
Very good. Boom. Get an A for that. Yes. So we're down to 5. And clearly, the elephant in the room is the elephant that isn't there, Donald Trump. So they're all vying for second place. And second place may be worth a lot because, all bets may be off if Donald Trump gets convicted in the January 6th case, which is coming soon. They're starting jury selection in February and get sentenced to prison. Then who knows? He could be bounced. I've talked about this before by the Republican National Committee. So second place means something. Plus, in 2016, Donald Trump got the nomination with only a third of the primary vote because the anti-Trump vote was divided among 4 or 5 different candidates. So these folks are hoping that they could become the single alternative to Donald Trump if the others would drop out and make it a real race. Now, everything has changed, of course, because these candidates now are going to have to respond, 1, to the horrible situation in the Middle East, and 2, to the bad night for Republicans yesterday. It's 2 new things they're going to have to deal with.
Kellen Hubner with their 5th super chat in our live streams. Thank you.
Thank you. We need this.
Our live streams are funded by viewers like you. What is the likelihood Biden listens to the bad pundits and doesn't run like LBJ, or does he know polls are wrong? Is there any hope for Dems if he doesn't?
That is a great question. My favorite book on the presidency is a very old book by George Reedy, who was press secretary to Lyndon Johnson back in the 60s, called The Twilight of the Presidency. And the basic point of the book is, once you win the presidency, you get caught in this insider bubble, where you are caught in the bubble and in your ear are the pollsters and the pundits and the handlers who always purvey the conventional wisdom, always bring you down to the lowest common denominator. And I fear that could happen with Biden, particularly when now that Ron Klain, his very smart advisor, who I've known for many years and is an expert on the keys, is now gone from the White House. But maybe Ron Klain still has Joe Biden's ear. But listening, to the conventional wisdoms, playing not to lose, is a way to lose.
3-man rush.
Three-man rush.
That's the word he hates in football. That's playing not to lose, right?
When the Giants had a 3-point lead and 20 seconds to go, 98% win. What did I say as soon as they went to a 3-man rush?
Well, tell the people what game you're talking about.
This was the Jets-Giants a week ago.
Yeah.
And 20 seconds left. They got like 50, 60 yards to go, the Jets. First thing the Giants do is go into a 3-man rush. And immediately I said they're going to lose this game. And they did.
Hey, he's the prediction professor.
That's right.
Not just politics.
No.
Patrick Murray
But not opera.
Patrick Murray asks, is America still an empire?
To some extent. More of an informal empire. We do have some territories. Not many, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, Guam, but certainly we are an imperial nation in terms of our interventions abroad and our influence abroad.
I don't know if you want to do this right now, but they want you to rank your top 10 presidents of all time.
How quick is the debate?
It's on in 5 minutes.
All right. We'll do this another time then.
I'm not sure if you'll know this, but what are your thoughts about Peter Zahan's projections that Biden will definitely win if he faces Trump, doesn't die, and no black swan / disaster?
I'm not familiar with that prediction. I don't think it's wrong, but I have no idea what it's based on. You got to understand, when it comes to prediction, hundreds of people make predictions, right? Mm-hmm. And there are only two outcomes. Either Biden wins or loses. So a lot of those people are going to be right, but just randomly right. To be credible as a predictor, you have to have a record over time of being right, and you have to have a basis, not just get lucky with lucky guesses.
President Nieto, one of our many presidents in the chat, saying, not including those that became president, who do you think was the most effective VP in our lifetime? Who was the worst?
Probably the most effective VP was one I didn't like, and that was Dick Cheney. He had tremendous influence over the George W. Bush administration. The biggest non-entity, kind of nobody, Dan Quayle, the vice president for George H.W. Bush.
Speaking of VPs, Donald Trump says he's considering Tucker Carlson for vice president. Your thoughts about that?
He would be better off picking a name out of the phone book than the toxic, lying Tucker Carlson.
Ouchie. All right, we are 3 minutes away from the debate. Let's set the stage. 5 candidates: Vivek Ramaswamy, Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott. It seems like to me, Dad, tonight they have to go after Trump. It's like at this point, it's what is the point of these debates if you're not going to try to win the nomination, if you're not going to try to go to the top? It seems
I'll tell you why. They're not going to go after Trump because they're fighting for second place. They're hoping Trump goes down in flames, gets convicted, gets sentenced to prison, and isn't a viable candidate anymore. And they're going to turn to the second place person. Second thing they might be hoping for is that they come on strongly enough so that they become the singular alternative to Trump rather than 5 people being the alternative to Trump. So I do not see a particularly vigorous attack on Trump in this debate. You may see something from Chris Christie, of course, but he's at 4%. He's not going anywhere. He has nothing to lose.
Yeah, but it seems like they keep waiting for Trump to tumble. He's not tumbling. He's still going strong.
The only way he tumbles is if he gets convicted and sentenced to prison.
Yeah, I guess.
That's what they're counting on. And that's not wrong. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like, the first debate was kind of interesting because we were seeing all of these people on the debate stage as presidential candidates for the first time. The second one just seemed like a bunch of bickering back and forth that didn't, I don't know, it just seems like somebody needs to shoot for the top or else no one's going to care about these people.
I think you're absolutely right. We'll see. I think the one person who has an advantage here is Nikki Haley because of the prominence now of foreign policy and military issues. And far and away, she is the most experienced and the most knowledgeable when it comes to foreign policy. So we'll see if that comes to the fore in this debate. The others really, have no experience or much knowledge of foreign policy. Certainly not DeSantis or Ramaswamy.
Yeah. I saw something today on TV that Nikki Haley put out some sort of statement that was pretty anti-Trump. I can't remember what it was now. Do you remember?
No, I don't. And she might go after Trump. She has to some extent, not full bore. Only Chris Christie has done that, and nobody cares what Chris Christie has to say among Republicans. We'll see.
Does anybody care what Chris Christie has to say?
No.
Right. He was a corrupt governor.
Yeah,
right?
and,
at the end of the day,
he's not getting anywhere among Republicans, and long ago, Democrats, wrote him off.
Yeah, exactly. But at least he's the sole anti-Trump voice out there. At least you need some buddy going after Trump other than everybody just being scared, you know?
Right. I'm not sure that hurts Trump when it comes from Chris Christie.
No, I don't think it does. But,
you know, I think I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. Nothing, as you say, changes Trump. He is unique in American politics. For 8 years, since he came out in 2015 as a presidential candidate, his approval rating hasn't moved. It's somewhere, 40, 42%, and pretty much unchanged no matter what has happened over those 8 years.
All right, here we are. 4 seconds away. Let me know if the audio is okay for people. We will be turning down the chat when we want to talk.
Tonight, a critical test in the race for the White House.
How many viewers?
5 Republicans battling to become their party's 2024 presidential nominee. The candidates ready to make their case on why they're prepared to be commander-in-chief amid 2 wars on the world stage, how they plan to tackle stubborn inflation, and how they can unite a deeply divided electorate. Who is best to take on President Biden? And can any of them first beat former President Trump, who's far ahead in the polls? The candidates are here. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
From NBC News, the Republican presidential debate. Live from the Adrian Arst Center in Miami, Florida.
Bijami.
Yes. And by the way, Trump has a rally going right down the street from this debate.
As he usually does, yeah.
As he usually does.
Hello and welcome to the Republican presidential debate. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press.
Hello, I'm Hugh Hewitt, host of Salem Radio's The Hugh Hewitt Show.
We are now just 68 days from the Iowa caucuses when Republican primary voters will begin to determine their party's nominee for president.
They may get some tougher questions from this particular panel.
They might.
It's not just a Fox News panel.
Thank God, yeah.
They have Hugh Hewitt on the right, but, other than that, they have 2 pretty powerful moderators.
Hugh Hewitt's reasonable. I mean, he's a Republican, obviously.
Yeah, he's
reasonable.
right, but
We'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers
Kristen
and the
Welker
opportunity
and
for a
Lester
closing
Holt are
statement.
going to be tough.
Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. We want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or
We'll
speak
also
over
see
your
whether
fellow
the moderators
debaters.
can control them.
Right, that's always
It's a lot of
big thing.
crosstalk last time.
Yeah.
Facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say. Continued interruptions may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause so that the candidates can be heard.
Oh, yeah, that always works. Hold your applause.
Yeah, right.
That always works.
And it always
All
works
right, our
to tell
first
them not
question,
to
the opening
interrupt one
question, is
another,
one
right?
for all of you. Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to run for the White House again. And he remains popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a
Good
year
question.
from now?
Yep.
This country is in trouble.
Oh,
and the
God.
elites that have put us here, they don't care about you.
The
They don't
elites.
care that you're having to grapple
The
with higher
elites.
grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's
Unlike
less.
him who went to Yale, right?
Right, unlike him who's a governor,
Right.
went to Yale.
Yeah, or Donald Trump, who's supposedly a billionaire,
Right.
went to Whittier Wharton.
Right.
Continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits. I'll take the arrows. I'll take the slings. Because ultimately, it's not about me. It's about you. I will
Talk
fight
about
for
dodging
you.
a question.
I will make
Seriously.
sure to lead this
Seriously.
country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than where we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016.
No, he's not.
No, he's
He
the
owes
exact
it to
same,
you
literally
to be
the
on
exact
this
same.
stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border
Wow,
wall.
what a
He should
devastating
explain
attack.
why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing.
Yes.
In Florida,
All right,
Okay,
finally.
this is a real answer, actually.
Yeah, finally a real answer.
victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee, next November I'll get the job done, and as president, I will deliver
Your time
for
is
you.
up. Let me turn to Ambassador.
Took him long enough, but he finally got to the point.
Yeah, he did.
You and not the former president.
Well, I think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have
Whoops.
What happened?
Don't ask me. I'm the dinosaur.
We lost the debate, people.
We'll get it back.
I don't know if this is our problem or a general NBC News problem. Let's see. Try to
fact that he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues. Now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency
must
in the
be one of
classroom.
those Trump
As a mom, I
accountants.
know what that means.
We know Trump accountants are the best accountants.
Yes, they are the best accountants. They can make the debt go away like that.
Yeah. What she was saying, I guess she's the accountant? I don't know.
I guess. I don't know.
That veteran. I will tell you, a military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is strong.
Ambassador, thank you very much. And, let me just-
Yeah, holding the applause has really worked for like 10 seconds.
Let me just caution the audience. Let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please,
Yeah,
keep
good luck,
restraining yourselves,
Lester.
and would be helpful.
Why
we
do
can
they
hear
make that rule?
I
That
know.
rule never works.
Just forget it.
Just
Yeah.
forget it, yeah.
Want and need to hear them. Mr. Ramaswamy, let me turn to you. Please make
Why?
your case. Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer to the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018,
Ooh,
2020,
the chairwoman.
2022, no
Didn't we
red
just
wave
hear
that
that
never
on this
came. We
show
got
a little while
trounced
ago?
last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk.
Oh, God, dude. Are you serious?
Asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party. You think the Democrats, we've got Kristen.
Yeah, being asked by people who are going to throw you softballs and questions that you want, that's a perfect format for a debate.
And so the fact of the matter is, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment.
Oh, my
Ask you, the
God,
Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed
The
on
Russia
this network for
collusion
years,
hoax.
was that real or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
I can't believe he's gone
Mr.
back
Roberts.
to 2016 and Russian intervention, which the Donald Trump intelligence community proved.
They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story,
Mr. Ramaswamy,
and they're going to rig this election.
He's
The
sounding...
Hunter Biden laptop rigged the 2020
He's sounding
election.
totally nutty. He's sounding completely nutty.
He sounded good to start.
Yeah, he sounded fine. Then he went off the
and
deep
then
end.
way off into
He
the
wants
deep
Joe
end of the
Rogan
pool.
to moderate the debate.
Yeah, and
Former
Hunter
President
Biden's
Trump.
laptop stole the
Well,
election.
Lester, look, you said it at the beginning of the debate. We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old band back together. He's starting in Ukraine, and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that. We have inflation in this country that is choking every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward,
How are you tackling those issues?
And say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country, and it needs to be said plainly.
Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you've said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the truth of my life destroys the lies of the radical
God, are we
left.
going back into his life story that we've heard 1,000 times?
Help our base solidify and attract independent voters into our party. The Great Opportunity Party is now winning back African-American voters and Hispanic voters because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is a part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring.
Aren't we a secular nation?
I think so.
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, Christian values, he said.
Oh.
Not even they say Judeo-Christian. Now it's just Christian.
How about Judeo-Islamic?
Right, yeah.
Hindu,
yes.
Buddhist, you name it.
Atheists,
yes.
Agnostics.
Our founding documents speak to the importance of a faith foundation. You don't have to be a Christian for America to work for you, but America does not work without a faith-filled Judeo-Christian foundation.
Oh, we got Judeo in there.
I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future. Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies, matter.
You know,
we have to get back to being
a lot of the other
nation.
candidates were empty. He's simultaneously empty and offensive. That's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
For us to
Senator
fight
Scott,
for that future.
Senator Scott, thank you. We're going to turn now to the challenges facing the next
Not much
commander-in-chief.
applause.
You'll all be fielding questions first from me and the Republican Jewish Coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there, and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. The Hamas should release every hostage, and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel in word and in deed, in public and in private. And I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes
lies.
Back over 700 people to safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to
there's been a lot of talk about Muslims abandoning Biden. After they hear this, are they going to embrace the Republicans?
Yeah, that's a good point.
There would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to hit our military men and women if it hadn't been for Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. And there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. They are the tip of the spear when it comes to this Islamic terrorism, and we need to make sure that we have their backs in that process.
All right. Thank you.
Israel does need America. She's wrong. America has provided more aid in a military sense to Israel than any other country, even though it's a little tiny country. And the Republican Speaker of the House put a poison pill into the Israel aid bill, cutting the IRS and ballooning the deficit, knowing that would never fly in the Senate. So forget all these strong words. Republicans have scuttled support for Israel.
I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. What? The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face.
Isn't he a multimillionaire?
He's a billionaire.
A billion? Oh, well, that's the problem with Nikki Haley. She's only a millionaire.
Well, I think he's saying she made money from
I
her
get what he's
career.
saying, and it's a lot of nonsense, of course.
Well, he likes to say that he's not part of the political, he's
right,
an outsider. But he's a billionaire. Billionaires are part of the political elite. They are part of the political process. They put their fingers on the scale, and they try to enter politics like this just because they're rich and no other reason.
Donald Trump has even bragged that his political contributions means he can control politicians.
Right. He's
Look at Harlan Crow, the billionaire, who basically bought a Supreme Court justice, Harlan Thomas.
Ramaswamy is no political outsider. He is part of the political establishment.
President Biden, diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I've said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran.
Oh, my God. He wants to start a war. He wants to start a war in the Middle East. You imagine what's going to happen to oil prices if we attack Iran?
The head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. In order for us to have a powerful response from America, we have to be in a position.
So you have the yin and the yang. On the one hand, you have these candidates saying we have no business getting involved. It was terrible going into Iraq and Afghanistan.
It's really just Ramaswamy saying that.
And then this guy's saying we want to start a war in the Middle East.
Right.
But again, these are the two of the most marginal candidates.
So big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time, to preserve the state of Israel. Remember that Hamas's main goal is to get rid of Israel, is to get Israel absolutely off the map. Now, there are three things I think I would say to him when he asked for advice. The first I would say is that it is absolutely your obligation to protect the territorial integrity of Israel. Secondly, to make sure you protect the security and the safety of your people. Every time something happens to compromise either one of those things, it creates greater unrest in the entire region. Second, you must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again. The fact is that Israel and their
Netanyahu was supposed to be the great protector. You know, people said he's right wing, but at least he's protecting Israel. But he didn't in the end. So saying they can't let it happen again. I mean, it's kind of. It already happened. I mean,
it already happened. Yeah. He was supposedly, a model of Donald Trump, the strongman leader who would protect his country, and just the opposite proved to be true.
Continue to isolate Iran. Work with the reasonable nations in the Middle East, the other Arab nations who want to partner with you, and make sure that we continue to isolate Iran so that their only friends in the world are the part of the evil foursome: China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Governor Christie, thank you very much. We're going to continue in this vein right now with a question from Matthew Brooks, the CEO of the Republican Jewish Coalition, a partner of the Republican National Committee in this debate. Here it is.
Given attacks by Iranian-backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, attacks that have wounded approximately 24 of our U.S. servicemen, do you support the use of military force by the United States against Iran?
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
What?
We got two of you on stage.
Cheap shot at DeSantis.
Oh, for his
lifts.
Yeah.
Really cheap shot.
Right. I kind of like it, though.
In Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard, and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal. Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home. Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going.
To listen to these people, you would think Iran is this little tiny, weak nation. It is a very large country with tens of millions of people and a incredibly strong military. You think we could just go in there and knock out the infrastructure of Iran? I thought Nikki Haley knew a little more about foreign policy than that.
Against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had Al-Qaeda in Iraq.
He was in
You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran, that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as Commander-in-Chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members...
Another war in the Middle East. Of course, it's easy to say when you have no power.
Right.
We have to defend the people who defend us.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism?
Mr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. I think the scourge of anti-Semitism across this country, including at places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago, when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America, death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism to irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about when they're siding with Hamas over Israel. They are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words, soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators—
He's finally said something that makes sense. His opposition to censorship.
This is his best answer so far. Although it is still a little loony. I mean,
he's very loony,
yes.
but somewhere in the looniness there is this kernel of truth.
Yes.
You weigh in on what you just heard.
Well, let me just say to every single university president in America, federal funding is a privilege, not a right. Number one. Number two, to every student who've come to our country on a visa to a college campus, your visa is a privilege, not a right. Number three, any campus that allows for anti-Semitism and hate, to allow students to encourage terrorism, mass murder, and genocide, you should lose your federal funding today, period. To all the students,
there is no university that encourages
encouraging Jewish genocide, I would deport you from those campuses. We have to stand strong with our Jewish Americans. At the end of the day, we should not have our Jewish students in a library being told to hide. On our streets in New York, a Jewish citizen has the right to walk.
They're talking a lot about anti-Semitism, which is good, but I think they need to talk about Islamophobia too, which they haven't done yet.
Exactly, and they won't. And, who was one of the most prominent purveyors of anti-Semitism? Donald Trump played on it throughout. When there were these neo-Nazis saying Jews will not replace us, he said, there are fine people among them. There were no fine people among those shouting Jews will not replace us.
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked. Second,
no questions asked.
I have friends
what
here
happened
in Florida.
to Republicans' advocacy of free speech?
They don't.
It's only speech that they agree with.
Right.
You have Jewish students fleeing for their lives at Cooper Union. Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places. I already acted in Florida. We had a group, Students for Justice of Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. Right. That is what we have to confront.
Both are pretty out of control.
It's both. It's always both, of course.
Any longer.
All right, Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Governor Christie, and considering what he just said, you led a state with a sizable Muslim population. Last month, as you know, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed in Illinois by his landlord, his mother.
Okay, here's some Islamophobia stuff.
Yeah.
And what has been charged as a hate crime. What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and with the members of the mosques. And I said to them, law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion, if you are going to comply with the law. And we developed fabulous relationships with Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Haley, what do you say to Americans who are simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about?
I think, you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors.
And how many times have the followers of Donald Trump's threatened violence and even carried out violence? Not a word about that, but this one incident in one school, they're blowing up as though it was, representative of Democrats and liberals all over America.
I think it's more than one thing that's happened, but
I think that, threatening to shoot up the kosher dining was just in one school.
Right, but the anti-Semitism
Yes, of course there is.
Death to America. They hate and would kill you too.
They're making believe that these Republicans are, anti-violence, defenders of peace, defenders of non-discrimination. And the truth is Donald Trump represents exactly the opposite of all that.
Violence towards anybody. We need to go back and soul search in our country and remember what we are about. And we are about taking care of people, not going and making them live in fear because some other terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
I thought Nikki Haley would really shine in this debate, which dealt with foreign policy issues. Haven't seen it. She really has not come across as distinct, knowledgeable, forceful.
Yeah.
President Zelensky told me on Sunday if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States, and Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more funding for Ukraine?
I certainly have been very supportive of Ukraine. I believe that ultimately we should make sure that the President of the United States states what is America's national vital interest in Ukraine. It is actually in degrading the Russian military. We've been very effective using our resources and our weaponry and the incredibly high price of Ukrainian blood to achieve that objective. Every day we get closer to the degradation of the Russian military, and that's good news. But the American people are frustrated that they do not have a president who reminds us and tells us, where's the accountability? Where are those dollars? How are those dollars being spent? We need those answers for us to continue to see the support for Ukraine. And at the same time, I would say that a package that's been offered by the president for Ukraine and Israel, that's the wrong approach. We need to focus specifically on providing Israel with the $14 billion that they need so that we show the world that we are 100% undeniably standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And then as we turn away from that direct support for Israel, we should go to our southern border and close our southern border with the resources necessary. I believe that we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. If we are going to deal with the national security emergency at our border, we have to do it now.
Senator Scott, thank you. But just to be very clear, if you were president, if you were in the Oval Office today, would you sign off on more military funding for Ukraine, or would you discontinue it?
Bottom line is we have to first have the level of accountability that allows the American people to understand where the resources have gone. Number one. Number two, after we have that responsibility taken care of it.
She asked him a pretty clear question, and he managed to pontificate and evade it.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously doesn't want to answer it.
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the critical question, isn't it? All this pontificating means nothing.
Of course. But guess what? He's a politician.
Yeah, but he's at 5% in the polls.
Say something, you're saying.
Yeah, he's not getting anywhere with this, empty stuff.
Right.
He's going to stay at 5% in the polls.
Right.
By doing so, we actually achieved the objective of keeping our military home. And that's good news.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not
Nazi,
democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media.
The thing with Ramaswamy, he says some things and then he just says something
goes completely off the deep end.
Like, that was fine until he started saying Zelensky is a Nazi.
Russian propaganda line.
Since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts. And so to frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening.
The banning
They're
of
using
Christians?
the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one time at least condemn.
Thank you. That's time.
At least to condemn their banning of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
or else
thank
we're talking
you.
out of both sides.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
What does that mean, banning of Christians?
I have no idea. As you say, he just goes off the deep end.
Ukraine.
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
The fact of the matter is she doesn't answer
So this
the
is what
question.
I will tell you.
We're driving
First
Russia
of all,
into China's
let's
hands
Ramaswamy,
because of
you
these
had
foolish
your time
policies.
to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank
Ambassador,
you. The
please.
first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy. No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons...
It says that Ukraine bans religious organizations with links to Russia.
Right, some minor pro-Russian.
So I don't know what he means by banning Christians.
They didn't ban Christians.
From
Who cares?
now, America can never be so arrogant.
I just feel like Ramaswamy says so much bullshit. You have to check him on some of it.
Now is the time to get
It's
partners.
nonsense that they banned Christians.
I mean, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is Christian.
Right, but it's the pro-Russian
Right.
part of it that
So
and I'm
he
not
just-
sure that's even passed yet. They didn't ban Christians per se.
So he's just lying, basically.
Basically lying, as he has on so many things.
Governor Christie, what is your take, and how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Till it's
Kristen,
over.
let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler.
Good point.
This is not a choice. This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world. And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said if you return nuclear missiles that were part of the old Soviet Union to Russia and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And the,
I'd like to respond.
And the absolute
Maybe he'll move
giving
to
in
5%.
to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
I'd like to
Governor
respond
Christie,
to that.
thank you. Governor DeSantis, I'd like you to weigh in on this idea. Are you concerned that this could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now?
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine. I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats that we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have the military. And I'm going to deport the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from the Middle East, come from all these places. Now, Biden wants $105 billion. 60, most of that's Ukraine, including some of it going to pay pensions for bureaucrats and salaries. That is a totally ridiculous use of American tax dollars. He says he has money for border to try to do, and the media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for the Indo-Pacific? A pittance. That is the top threat that we face. We need to bring this war to an end. We need the Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may
Thank you,
respond
Governor.
to the Ukraine question.
In fact,
Not only didn't he not answer the question, but he also gave us another spate of falsehoods. He never told us whether or not he would support continued aid to Ukraine and for how long. He just said he wouldn't send American troops, which is not an issue at this point, unless we don't aid Ukraine and Putin goes into NATO countries.
the American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a 355-ship Navy. That's what he pushed for. He got to 300. It's now at 291. Is that big enough to deter and, if necessary, defeat an invasion of Taiwan?
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs to modernize our military. We need to do everything we can. The first thing is you go and you make sure you have the backs of Ukraine. That's why the Taiwanese want us to support Ukraine, because they know that sends the biggest message to China. The second thing is we go to China and we start being tough on them. No more sales of our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen. Then you go and to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will go and end all formal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans from fentanyl, something Ron has yet to say that he's going to do. And then we modernize our military. When we strengthen our military, when we modernize it with the focus of cyber, artificial intelligence, and space, when we make sure that we have the backs of our friends, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, and we should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There's nothing China...
Man, a lot of war.
A lot of war. Boy, a lot of warmongering. Plus, all of these Republicans are saying we need to cut the deficit, we need to cut spending,
Right, and then
but now we're going to spend, all these trillions of dollars on the military, on Taiwan, on Ukraine.
Yeah.
Not enough. We have to have the ability to back up a strategy of denial of President Xi's ambitions. And if China's able to be the world's leading
he said President G.
Yeah.
I think it's Xi.
They will export authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. So this is, to this generation, what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation. I've already released a plan. We're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a
But we're going to
path
cut the deficit.
to 600 ships.
We're going to build
over the
another
next 20
100
years.
ships, but cut the deficit.
We have a strategy not just military,
And we're going to cut taxes.
from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their number one way to do economic development. In Florida,
You notice who's absent in this debate, who they haven't even talked about, even when they were asked a direct question about him?
Trump.
I haven't heard a word about Trump.
They got to attack him. They're not doing it. You said they weren't going to do it.
I said they weren't going to attack him. They don't have the guts to do it, and they don't think it's to their benefit.
Where are we going to get the money, and what would you build, and what kind
where
of
are we going to get the money?
attacking Taiwan?
Well, two major problems with the question. Number one, we do not have currently a defense industrial bank to allow us to have the kind of production that we need in order to keep America safe. Frankly, if we are not prepared to fight and engage in 3 continents at the same time, think about where we are today. In the Middle East.
Wow, more warmongering. Now we're going to have wars on 3 continents.
Gosh. Pretty grim.
Whatever happened to Republican, inward-looking America first isolationism?
Yeah, good question. I mean, Ramaswamy seems to be...
Ramaswamy is the only one, yeah.
For us to have the military to fight 3 different continents at the exact same time, we are going to have to invest heavily in our military, but we're also going to have to invest heavily in an industrial base so that we can hit our objectives from a military perspective, not only with our ships, but also with our planes.
It's easy to forget what the question was, which is, where are you going to get the money?
Yeah. Good point.
We're going to have to invest. One of the things I do in my Made in America strategy is we create more than 4 million new jobs by having high-tech manufacturing come back to America, decoupling from China, so that we focus our attention on creating that industrial revolution that will be necessary for us to achieve the goal of having a military that is ready to be lethal and come home safe.
Not only what did ever happen to the deficit, whatever happened to limited government? They want this huge military-industrial complex, which President Eisenhower, when he left office in 1960, warned against and said, was the most dangerous thing going on in the country, destroying our liberties.
But here's the dirty little secret. Our actual defense industrial base depends on China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China? We depend on them for that, just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life, and we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, would have signed. Today, if he were alive, that's the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as the next president. I do have to recognize that Ron DeSantis was correct about acknowledging Nikki Haley's tough talk when she was ambassador to the UN, calling China our great friend, bringing the CCP to South Carolina. What he left out, though, Ron, and be honest about it, there was a lobbying-based exemption in that bill that allowed Chinese nationals to buy land within a 20-mile radius of a military base lobbied for by one of your donors. So I think we have to call a spade a spade. We need politicians who are independent of the forces that increase our dependence on China. My message to Xi Jinping is this. You are done buying land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. U.S. businesses won't expand into the Chinese market until you play by the same set of rules.
Ramaswamy,
you're kicked out of the WTO, and you actually have to have accountability accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially, which unleashed hell on the world, we have to hold them accountable.
Do you have a number and a plan?
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years. I think we have to, at minimum, be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
Hugh, I'd like to
by
respond.
20% over the next.
Did you hear a plan there?
He doesn't have a plan.
No.
Is that nobody answers your question.
He's trying to
Thank you.
Yeah. He's trying to skirt this line between being America first and also having a strong military.
Exactly.
So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively. And if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so is our first priority.
Gosh, I think war has been the majority topic of this entire debate.
It really has.
It's pretty grim. I mean, I'm trying to gauge how I feel. I just kind of feel depressed because it's just like war in Taiwan, war in Israel, war in Ukraine, increasing our military.
War in Iran.
War in Iran. It's just like, I don't know if
It's
these are
really
issues,
frightening.
and I don't know if these are issues people are concerned about.
Yeah.
Your average American is not.
I don't think your average American wants to fight 3 wars.
No. And I don't even think they're even really thinking about it. I mean, on a daily basis, certainly they're not thinking about it. I mean, now in the news media with Israel, war is more on the mind, but it seems so disproportionate. They've been talking about war for forever.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that you hear so much warmongering here.
All right, they're on a commercial now. All right, back to the chat. Anybody want to say hello in the chat? Yeah, it just feels like, I mean, they haven't talked about affordability. They haven't talked about, I mean, I don't know. They're talking about things that I don't think Americans are that concerned with.
And, that's partly, I thought the moderators would be, so much better. The moderators are horrific. The moderators are guiding them to, an hour of talking about war.
Yeah.
The moderators have not brought up issues that people really care about.
Yeah, I think your average citizen has probably turned this off by now.
Probably so.
I mean, if you're not into politics, you're probably not. I mean, again, you're just not that. This stuff is not top of mind for you. I mean, Taiwan, again, it's in the news. There's always a threat, but I don't think your average American is thinking about that much.
Not for an hour. Not for the. Look, and regardless, people. The vast majority of the audience listens about to the first half hour and then turns it off. And to have, the whole first hour all about fighting wars on 3 continents, it just doesn't make any sense. And it's partly the candidates' fault and partly the moderators. I hype these moderators and they've done nothing but disappoint me.
Yeah, it's this debate feels a little draining. I mean, it's so existential. It's so full of what ifs,
Yeah, so full of bluster too.
Yeah.
Empty bluster. And as Christy pointed out, they don't answer the question.
Yeah.
Particularly questions about, all right, you want to, build 100 ships in a couple of years. Where are you getting the money?
Yeah.
Particularly since in the last debate, all these candidates were talking about cutting the deficit, cutting spending.
Yeah.
I will be right back.
He's going to go to the restroom, I believe.
Yes.
Here.
I'm allowed.
You're allowed. Hello, everybody in the chat. What's up? This is your time to talk directly to me. I know I'm full of information you want to hear, so what's up? Yeah, I don't know. I feel weird about it. I'm like, this debate is so depressing. I don't feel like it's really covering anything that people have on their minds, maybe other than Israel. I mean, Ukraine isn't super top of mind for people, certainly. Alex Roa, big fan. Thanks, Alex. Tell us a joke. Patrick Murray, what did I major in college? I majored in communications. Sam, would a Democrat to be better for you? I don't know. Not necessarily. I don't know. I can't talk to a hypothetical Democratic debate. I've seen some Democratic debates that have been good, some that have been bad. Just depends. You know? My dog just came in. Sam, what color is the dress? I can't remember. I think it's gold and white, if I remember correctly. It was a meme, if you don't know, a long time ago. It was blue or black dress or white or gold dress. I don't know. Debate doesn't equal election results. You're right, Alex, for sure. Obama, Minnesota, no. I mean, I know about NIMBY. Yeah. I mean, I know about Never in My Backyard, right? I'm no expert on housing for sure. My dog's name is Kiko. Oh, Alex, you think it's all right? The debate is back. We're gonna go to the debate, and so is the man of the hour, Allan Lichtman.
I have my halftime score.
Okay, what is it?
But I need the mic.
Oh.
Yep. Big winner.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Right.
As I predicted.
You said that every debate.
Well, as I predicted, they didn't lay a glove on him.
Right.
Big loser, kind of all of them. None of them really helped them. It's the most disappointing, Nikki Haley. I thought this was an opportunity to shine, and it just didn't happen.
Yeah, she hasn't done much of anything.
No, she really hasn't.
TikTok following the flooding of pro-Hamas propaganda onto TikTok accounts across the United States. Chairman Gallagher called it shocking. He called the app predatory, controlled by America's preeminent adversary. One used to push propaganda and divide America. It's spyware, he said, a means of surveillance.
Spyware, more
Governor
warfare,
Christie, do you agree with Chairman Gallagher?
Now we're talking
And
about
if so, would you ban or force the sale of TikTok?
Oh, no,
I agree
about
100% with Chairman Gallagher. And
I'm
let
sure
me say this.
TikTok is #1 priority for the American people.
Right.
Who cares about abortion, inflation,
climate change?
Climate change, doesn't matter. Guns, violence.
And when you saw what happened in the last few weeks with all of this anti-Semitic, horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate, this is China trying to further divide the United States of America. And this is one of the big failings among many of the Trump administration. He talked tough about TikTok. I heard him do it many times. But when it came down to it, he did not ban them when he could have and should have. And now since then, we've had an additional nearly 6 years of this type of poison being put out throughout the United States.
Paul wants to know who's winning so far. We already said
Nobody. Donald Trump by far. And most disappointing, Nikki Haley.
I thought DeSantis started strong, but he sort of disappeared.
Absolutely right. He did start strong, and then, as he has in most of the debates, disappeared.
Christie's been doing pretty well, but it doesn't really matter. He's so irrelevant.
I would say Christie's done the best, but irrelevant.
Yes,
no one's listening to him.
Right.
To the Chinese people from our social media companies, yet we just
I predicted
open the door
he'll
and
move
let
from
them do
4% to 5%.
I don't even.
But
think,
you don't agree.
I don't even think that'll happen.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Governor DeSantis. Would you ban or force the sale
I guess
of
the
TikTok,
worst
regardless?
are Tim Scott and Ramaswamy, which is not surprising.
Right.
Tim Scott because he's empty, and Ramaswamy because he goes off on the deep end.
Yeah.
Parts of our society. So my policy on China and the Chinese Communist Party is very simple. We win, they lose. And in order to do that, it's not just military, it's economic, and it's cultural. And as the dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I'm concerned about the data that they're getting from our young people and what they're doing to pollute the minds of our young people. These kids get these devices and they have a mind of their own. And I know a lot of parents are looking, it's hard to even keep it out. China's obviously the most extreme, but this is happening with other things. So we are going to do that, and we are going to make sure to protect the American people. It's a full spectrum approach to be able to fend China off. Yes, military deterrence.
You're right. He's lost all his momentum. I mean, this is just blithering.
Yeah.
If we ignore that, we're not going to be able to win the fight.
Thank you, Governor. Ambassador Haley, speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me
Samuel,
and you didn't.
are you being poisoned by TikTok?
I am not on TikTok.
They want to talk about the Chinese land. from 10 years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron, you are the chair of your economic development agency that as of last week said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese business.
More Chinese boogeyman.
Yeah.
That is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your...
No one has any idea what she's talking about.
This is
not a clue.
She should be. This is a bad. Again, she's doing really bad. You know, she moved the topic away from TikTok, which isn't that important, but she moved it away from the topic at hand and is now talking about land grants.
Land grants in South Carolina.
Yeah.
No one knows what she's talking about.
No.
Florida, we abolished it, and of course we banned China from buying
the
land.
website
Not
last
exactly
week.
a
Go
great
check.
recruiting pitch.
Oh, now we're getting the crosstalk.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign on TikTok. How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate she made,
the world is under existential threat from climate change. Gun violence is the biggest killer of our children. Women are under threat of having the biggest, most intrusive, big government intrusion in their lives. And we've spent, 10 minutes on TikTok?
Well, none of these people believe in any of those things that you mentioned. So it's kind of hard to ask them where they're just going to say, I don't, climate change, whatever.
It's all irrelevant, gun violence.
Yeah.
But they do have things to say about abortion.
Yeah, but they're on the wrong side of the majority
Well, that's
of
okay.
Americans.
I'd still like to hear what they have to say.
Popular to talk tough on China when
Or
she
the
was UN
economy.
ambassador.
We haven't heard anything on the economy.
Yeah.
You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy. Get to the root cause. Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling. The fact of the matter is Democrats are on TikTok today. The only person, one of the few people who is putting up content the way the actual algorithms work, speaking for pro-Israel views or others, is
Ambassador
me. And I predict
Haley,
more Republicans will join it. But stop U.S. companies from turning over data to Chinese companies. That's the real
Moderators
answer, not the
like
virtue
Kristen
signaling.
don't get to respond to personal attacks, but you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part.
I don't think North Korea has stopped testing ballistic missiles.
Change your mind. That's allowed. But don't lie to the people about what you've said or what you've done in South Carolina. You have brought them to South Carolina. Ron is right about that.
You know, she's let Ramaswamy put her on the defensive. Big mistake.
Yeah.
She gets nothing from sparring with him.
Yeah.
Making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of the Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't stopped.
Senator Scott, it is your turn. Mr.
The millions you
Ramaswamy,
made afterwards.
Everybody else.
I know. I'm kind of over this debate.
I'm really over it.
Yeah.
I've not heard one single concrete policy proposal about what they are going to do to improve the lives of the American people. Not one.
Yeah. Ban TikTok.
Ban TikTok, I guess.
But was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app. Period. We also should provide, in my parents' bill of rights,
or you can create regulations for these social media apps, generally speaking.
Exactly.
And that will deal with a lot of the problems too.
It's not just TikTok.
Right. It's not just TikTok.
Control of the information, especially of our kids. Where does it go? We should know that. One of the ways that we get to know that is by having a parental consent. But if we can eliminate TikTok, that is a first step. But it's not just TikTok. China continues to spy on our kids, but they're also buying our farmlands. We talked about that several times there. We have to make sure that we use the tools that are in our toolkit to stop China from buying farmland.
Boring.
On our bases.
This couldn't be more boring.
Make sure that they stop stealing our intellectual property. They're literally stealing our IP to compete against us. My administration, we stopped that day one, and we start making.
And how do you stop that?
That's the big question.
That's a huge question. Nobody wants them to do it, but I haven't heard a word about how you stop it.
Talk about Venezuela, where millions have fled political.
Venezuela? What the hell is going on with these topics?
Yeah, we're already well past the halfway point of the debate.
We're an hour in.
We're more than an hour in.
Yeah.
What is this, a 2-hour debate? We're more than halfway through.
We still have another hour of this? Crap.
Temporarily eased sanctions to encourage electoral reforms. Governor DeSantis, do you see the political situation in Venezuela
disappointed in
as
these
a
moderators.
threat to the United States?
The topics have been terrible.
Topics have been abysmal, and they haven't stopped the crosstalk.
For oil, like Biden has had to go beg. I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs. We're going to lower your gas.
There was a Green New Deal.
Right, there's not.
There isn't. It's just another boogeyman.
Energy independent and secure. We'll choose Midland over Moscow. We'll choose the Marcellus over the mullahs, and we'll choose Bakken over Beijing. That is good for America's national security. Biden's Green New Deal, that's good for Venezuela, it's good for Russia, it's good for Iran, and it's good for China. So I would turn the screws on the Venezuelan regime. I think it's a corrupt, dictatorial regime, and we should never go hat in hand begging for oil from them.
Just to be clear, would you reimpose the sanctions?
Yes, absolutely.
Ambassador Haley, what would your approach be?
You know, I stood on the Simon Boulevard Bridge.
Do you think
and watched
anyone listening knows what the sanctions on Venezuela are?
No.
Not a one.
From Venezuela to Colombia. They were fleeing socialism and begging for freedom. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to sanction Maduro. We shouldn't be getting dirty oil, and Biden just gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary priority status, which is just going to have more of them come. But on the energy side, it cracks me up that Ron continues to do this. He has opposed fracking. He's opposed drilling. Last time he said it wasn't true, and everybody found out that it was true. He opposed it before Florida voters even voted on it. He was praised by the Sierra Club, and you're trying to make up for it and act like you weren't a liberal when it comes to the environment. You were.
Ramaswamy's an also-ran. She gets nothing from sparring with him.
You called her Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy.
No, her name's Nikki Haley.
No, I said Ramaswamy's an also-ran. She gets nothing from sparring with him.
Correct.
And I know most Floridians agree with me.
You banned fracking.
Thank you very much. Lester?
So we're going to drill, burn, mine.
Oh, the economy.
Destroy the climate.
News, how am I going to make sure my pantry's stocked without breaking the bank? You've all said the best way to deal with rising prices is to cut government spending. But that would take time to play out, and Americans are struggling right now. Senator Scott, I'll start with you. What would you do the moment you take office to help Americans manage the cost of living? So we're talking about short term here.
My mother was a single mother who raised me and my brother in a very challenging economic situation. The first thing I can tell you is that when your gas prices are 40% higher right now than they were just a little over 2 years ago, that's not a problem for my mama. That was a crisis. The first thing I would do as President of the United States is I would sign the XL Keystone Pipeline and start seeing resources flow. Second thing I would do is make sure that there's certainty and predictability so that those folks who have the leases in our country would have the certainty and predictability to go ahead and become energy independent. We should focus not just on being energy independent, we should focus on being energy dominant. America is the home to more energy resources than any other country on the planet. We can reduce the price of energy, we can reduce the price of food and the price of electricity if we focus on my build here, don't borrow from China plan that is embedded the Made in America strategy, creates 10 million new jobs in 3 different areas. One is
the energy sector is one of the least productive of jobs. It's not an employment-intensive sector. And by the way, the last quarter, what do you think Exxon made in profits?
Hundreds of millions.
19 billion. Wow. And that translates to almost 80 billion over a year.
Yeah.
But, they're claiming, Biden is killing the American energy industry. It's just ridiculous.
They've been saying this forever, though.
Forever.
Well, actually, it does, to be honest with you. The way that the economy works is it works on the ability to anticipate excess supply versus the demand. When that happens, confidence drives our prices down because we know there's going to be a greater surplus. When you allow for those who have leases to actually start drilling, to start using those leases for more energy excavation, you put our economy in the strongest position. And as a result of that, prices start going down. That is the kind of economy that, as President of the United States, I would lead this nation to making sure that we first use the resources in our own country and not going outside of our country in order to achieve our objective. Proverbs 22:7 reminds us that the borrower is slave.
And meanwhile, they're all talking about a war in the Persian Gulf, which would quadruple oil prices.
We start allowing this nation to once again return.
Senator, thank you. Let me ask the same question to Governor DeSantis. Can you give us some...
Hey, if you're watching right now, throw us a like. 102 people watching. Throw us a like, please.
A better economic footing right away.
So I started off working minimum wage jobs. I did $6 an hour as an electrician's assistant. I worked all kinds of things to be able to get through school. And I did that because I believed in America, if you work hard and get the most out of your God-given ability, you can get ahead. And what's happening now, many of you are working hard and you're falling further and further behind. I've met people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and all across the country who've talked about all the burdens that they're facing with the rising prices. And I've heard from multiple people the same story. When they go grocery shopping, what they now do is they figure out what they have to take out of the cart.
Wasn't the question what you're going to do about this? Okay.
Yeah, these generalized stories I don't think they're very effective. Just saying, when you go to the grocery store and you can't, it's just like, I don't know. I don't think they're that effective.
Executive orders,
and these people are not ordinary, grocery shoppers. They are.
I know, but they're trying to talk.
I know.
Right.
Ronald Reagan was really good at this. These people are no Ronald Reagans.
True.
With their reckless monetary policy, what we have faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. They botched it. Congress botched it. Both parties are to blame. Fed should focus on stable prices. They are not an economic central planner for the American people.
Governor, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, weigh in on
this. What was his plan? I think I missed it.
I missed it.
I missed it.
I don't know.
I blinked. I missed it.
Yeah. To my vision and policy prescription for this country. Increase the supply of everything. It's the law of supplies and demand. Increase the supply of energy. That brings down the cost of energy, grows the economy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Increase the supply of labor in this country. Stop using our tax.
All right, so they're all talking about drilling and mining and burning and leasing. Are any of these moderators then going to ask them about the effect of that on the planet?
Good question.
That's making housing more expensive for ordinary Americans across this country. So that's the true answer. And I think it takes a CEO in the White House who actually understands this to get this done. Because Americans at home, they know the Bidenomics is a lie. Prices are going up. Interest rates and mortgages to buy your home.
Actually, prices are no longer going up. Inflation is well down in recent quarterly reports.
As a member of my generation, I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. The reason my generation has lost our sense of national pride, in part, is because people in my generation feel like the American dream isn't available to them. And part of the reason why is we burdened them with four-year college degrees that did not serve their head start on the American dream. People will be more proud of a country if we're all making more money in that country. This is how we revive national pride and our identity, and it will take a CEO in the White House with zero-based budgeting, by the way, to take on the federal debt to get this job done.
Let me turn to Governor Christie on that.
Well, look, Lester, part of the entire premise of the question, and I agree with Tim on this, is Absolutely, energy is the key to this because it drives every one of those other prices. You know, now food gets to your grocery store, it gets trucked. And those truckers have to pay for fuel and for the higher fuel prices. And when you go ahead and you tell people, we are going to unleash every bit of American energy, every bit of its potential, what happens in the futures markets? The prices go down because those people who are believing that the Biden program will continue are the ones who are bidding this up. And let me tell you the other place that's bidding it up, in the Middle East. And so if you don't believe that making sure that Israel and that Israel situation that's going on right now isn't resolved and resolved quickly as President of the United States and bring stability back, that will also not permit countries like Saudi Arabia and others to be able to jack their prices as well in what they say is in response to a crisis, when it's really what it's in response to is putting more money in their pockets. When they have an American president who knows that Israel must be defended not with humanitarian pauses and not with suggestions for ceasefire, but with letting them know we will supply them with everything they need, that will also bring stability to the market. Energy is the key to bringing this down. It's what every American family needs when they turn on their lights, fill up their car, and go to the grocery store. And we need to do that first and foremost. That's the short-term answer.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Haley, let me come at this from a slightly different direction. Americans in rural communities are being especially squeezed by inflation right now. An Iowa State University study found that last year inflation cost rural households about an extra $5,000. How would you specifically help rural Americans who are suffering right now, Ambassador?
Well, I'm a product of rural America. I grew up in rural South Carolina.
At least they're not talking about war anymore.
Thank goodness.
Richer
Although
and the poor.
all their talk about war totally contradicts all their talk about energy prices.
Right.
Because you start a war in the Middle East, as I said, energy prices go through the roof.
We'll cut taxes on the middle class, but we have to stop this spending binge that's happening by Republicans and Democrats in Congress.
Oh,
I
so
will
now
make
we're
sure
stopping spending after talking about huge increases in spending for the military. So where are they getting these spending cuts?
Good question.
COVID fraud that exists, $1 out of every $7. We'll stop the spending, we'll stop the borrowing, we'll eliminate the earmarks, and I'll veto any spending bill that doesn't go back to pre-COVID levels. That will cut trillions and allow us to be safe. We also need to be not energy independent, energy dominant. We are blessed with resources, let's do it. But the reason no one should give you a number, Hugh, on the amount of ships in the Navy is because in a few years, our interest expense is going to be more than our defense budget. So no one can give you that number realistically without first tackling what's happening with the financial situation. It would be a false number to give you that. We have got to understand this is a crisis.
I think maybe part of the problem is you don't need 2 hours for 5 people. Maybe you need 2 hours for, 10 people, but I don't think you need 2 hours for 5 people.
Absolutely not. And, if they cut to the chase and controlled the debate, an hour would be plenty of time. But to spend 10, 15 minutes on TikTok and constantly repetitive stuff about, building the military, drilling and mining and burning, how many times do we need to hear this?
Sure, and we have to deal with this problem. Now, look, if we raise the retirement age a few years for folks that are in their 30s and 40s.
Dad, Chris Wilson asks, I know that the keys, I know it's the keys that matter, but is it fair to say that the lack of debating charisma could adversely affect a candidate?
Well, I do have 2 keys on charisma, but they're very high threshold keys. They ask whether the incumbent candidate or the challenging candidate is the once-in-a-generation inspirational candidate. A Franklin Roosevelt or Ronald Reagan. And as I said, looking at this crew, there's no Ronald Reagan among them.
Right, not even close.
Not even close.
Out there
not
tonight,
even in the stadium.
I don't know if Warren Buffett is collecting Social Security, but if he is, shame on you. You shouldn't be taking the money. There are
Warren
a lot of
Buffett.
programs in this
How
country.
did he get it here?
I don't know.
At least they're not talking about George Soros.
True.
Boy, talk about anti-Semitism. How many times have the Republicans viciously attacked George Soros, claiming he's responsible for black riots, for crime, for corrupt officials? He is the biggest target this Jewish Holocaust survivor of any figure on the part of Republicans.
Poverty. That's what we got to get back to. Rich people should not be collecting Social Security.
Governor, can you give me a specific age? 69, 70? What would the age be?
No, look, that's going to be a power of a negotiation with Congress, Kirsten, and hell, I'm not going to start negotiating until I get there.
All right, Ambassador Haley, let me have you weigh in on this because you said in June that you would be open to raising the retirement age. Have you determined what that age would be specifically, and what other reforms are you looking at?
So first of all, any candidate that tells you that they're not going to take on entitlements is not being serious. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare will go bankrupt in 8. Right now, you have Ron and Trump joining Biden and Pelosi saying they're not going to change or do any sort of entitlement reform. What we need to do is keep our promises. Those that have been promised should keep it. But for like my kids in their 20s, you go and you say we're going to change the rules. You change the retirement age for them. Instead of cost of living increases, we should go to increases based on inflation. We should limit benefits on the wealthy. Bernie Marcus can tell you he hates getting that check. Limit the benefits on the wealthy and then expand Medicare Advantage plans. Seniors love that. And let's make sure we do that so that they can have more competition. That's how we'll deal with entitlement reform, and that's how we'll start to pay down this debt.
And can you give me a specific age? Have you determined the age?
Again, you have to work with Chris. What I can tell you is it's going to be those in their 20s just coming into the system.
And how is that going to cut Social Security except 40 years from now? She said it's going to go bankrupt in 10, but her ideas won't click in for 40 or 50 years.
I believe we will have to actually fix this problem while still leaving Social Security and Medicare benefits.
For decades, we've heard Social Security is going bankrupt. We heard it during the Reagan administration. It's just it's not going bankrupt. It's just another scare tactic.
$33 trillion national debt going to fight wars like in places like Iraq and Afghanistan.
Well, he's right about that.
Minus that, our national debt would be $26 trillion right now. Then you go to zero-based budgeting, which I've proposed as a CEO. It's how I've run businesses. It's how many CEOs run businesses. Don't use last year's budget as the baseline. Start with zero as the baseline, and then ask what's actually necessary. 75% headcount reduction. Yes, that is severe. In the number of federal employees in the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. Shut down redundant agencies that should not exist. Deliver economic growth as a positive tailwind. I think we can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth if we really take the regulatory shackles off of our economy. And against that backdrop, I believe this is our last best window to be able to take care of our national debt problem through those severe measures, including sacrificing the foreign wars that many bloodthirsty members of both parties have a hunger for. That's the one secret for how we're going to be able to do this, and that requires discipline. So we can't have the first conversation we were having, sending foreign aid willy-nilly to countries whose national debt per capita is less than ours.
Actually, in many ways, he's been the most specific in telling us what he would do. But then, of course, he's also the nuttiest.
Yeah, true.
Sustainable.
The bottom line is a simple one. We have to grow our economy and cut our spending. Let me just say to my mama and to every other mama
I just
or
can't take it anymore.
receiving
His
Social
mama,
Security,
his,
as President of the United
his
States,
brothers,
I will
his
protect
sisters,
your
his
Social
family.
Security.
Enough. We don't care.
$750 billion on Medicare, about $300 billion on Medicaid, about $400 billion on veterans benefits, $1.7 trillion on annual appropriations. If we're going to actually tame this tiger, the way you do it is not by picking on seniors who have paid into a program that deserve their money coming back out to them. The way you deal with it is, number one, you have to grow your economy. My plan, Made in America, creates 10 million new jobs, grows our economy at 5%. By doing so, you add trillions of dollars of economic activity.
It's probably on his website.
Number two, you have to cut taxes. When we cut taxes in 2017, I wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act.
Oh, so we're going to cut the deficit by cutting taxes. When Trump did that, it raised the deficit by over $1 trillion.
Ross Goldberg says Tim Scott is another wannabe Reagan. He's got a lot of wannabeing to reach that level.
Yeah, he's got a long way to go, and he's never going to get there.
Right.
We have to take our annual appropriations back to pre-2012 2020 pre-COVID levels of spending, which would save us about $500 billion in the next budget window. By doing
Senator,
that, we deal with Social Security and our mandatory spending.
Thank you, Senator. Very quickly, would you raise the retirement age? Would you be open to raising the retirement age, or do you rule that out?
Have you heard one concrete thing they were going to cut?
I'm kind of blearied out.
I'm blearied out too. I heard we're going to, raise the retirement age for 20-year-olds, which will help us 50 years from now. We're going to grow the economy. We're going to, have zero-based budgeting. Haven't heard them say one program that they're going to cut. And meanwhile, they're, spending trillions more on the military and fighting 3 wars. And cutting taxes, of course.
They're working night and day.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Governor DeSantis, finally to you, would you be open to raising the retirement age, and how would you keep Social Security sustainable?
Well, look, as governor of Florida, I know a few people on Social Security, and I know it's important. My grandmother lived till 91, and Social Security was her sole source of income, and that's true for a lot of seniors throughout this country. So what I'd say to seniors in America, promise made, promise kept. I understand what you're going through with the rising prices, and you need that Social Security check. So we'll make sure to get that done. What can you do to help shore up Social Security? One of the things that's causing problems is the inflation. We have to reduce inflation. When you have higher inflation, the seniors get a cost of living adjustment, which means the program.
He was asked about retirement age and Social Security, and they keep going off on these tangents. Yes, we'd love to reduce inflation. Yes, we'd love to cut the deficit. I haven't heard one single concrete, program for this.
Correct.
Social Security would have more tax revenue than it put out. They would take it and then they'd write an IOU to Social Security. Congress has a lot of dirty hands on this. I'm going to force Congress to stop spending so much money. And one thing we have to do when we talk about the retirement age is just something that's changed in the last 4 or 5 years. Life expectancy in the United States is declining.
So, Governor, yes or no? Would you raise it?
That's because of COVID mostly.
Yes.
Peg it on life expectancy, but we have had a significant decline in life expectancy in this country, and that's just a fact.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Thank you, candidates. And we will be right back after a quick break from Miami, Florida.
All right, folks. It's just us now. Wow, this is boring. I don't know why it's so boring.
It's so boring for a number of reasons. One, they all pontificate. They don't answer questions. They contradict themselves. You know, we're going to cut the deficit. But we're also going to cut taxes and spend trillions on the military and fight all these wars.
Yeah.
Nothing connects with anything else, and no one stands out. And Donald Trump isn't here. Mm-hmm. And at least Donald Trump is entertaining, if nothing else. None of these people are entertaining.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan was entertaining. You might agree or disagree with him, but, he was entertaining. None of these folks are interesting or entertaining. I thought Nikki Haley would be, and she's been a dud.
Kellen says, I disagree with the Lichtmans. Trump didn't win the debate. Biden did.
Trump what?
Trump didn't win this debate. Biden did.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I was thinking among Republicans who won the debate. But who made that comment?
Kellen.
Kellen, you're absolutely right. Biden comes out the big winner because not only did they not lay a hand on Trump, they didn't lay a finger on Biden.
Ross Goldberg says they have no good popular policies. That's a good point. They can't really go into specifics because a lot of their policies on a national level are pretty unpopular.
Yeah. Exactly. When you don't have popular policies, you resort to talking about your grandmother or your mama or, pontificating. We're going to grow the economy. We're going to, cut the deficit. We're going to unleash our energy.
I mean, honestly, on energy, they at least said specific things. They're going to frack, they're going to drill, they're going to get more oil. Unfortunately, that's also going to destroy the planet. Absolutely destroy the planet.
It's already starting to destroy the planet. And, 98% of scientists warn we're 5-6 years away from the point of no return, but none of them, even mention or address that.
It would be interesting to see if a Republican candidate emerged. I mean, I don't see it happening, but emerged in the next 5-10 years that was a more climate conscious candidate.
They're going in the other direction.
Yeah, of course. But, Teddy Roosevelt was a big, Nixon was also a big, did some big environmental things, right?
Nixon was, much more liberal than we think, particularly on the environment, the Endangered Species Act, the EPA. He was excellent on the environment. He was just twisted and paranoid and tried to destroy our democracy. But in terms of policy, he was the most liberal president between Lyndon Johnson and Barack Obama. More liberal than the Democrats, Bill Clinton and Jimmy Carter.
Augusto says, before I go, Trump ahead on the polls, but do you think he will defeat Biden? We don't have an answer to that yet.
Not yet. There's too much still, uncertain on the keys.
We do have a short, if you check out our short page, Augusto, we do have a quick, a short on him leading in the polls.
Yeah.
So you can check that out. Anybody got any questions for him while we're on this commercial break? Throw your questions out there. We want to hear them. Right, Dad?
Yes. We getting any of those contributions?
Not during the debate, no.
Yeah. That says something, doesn't it?
I know. Well, people are watching. They're not engaging in a discussion with us,
Right.
Which I understand.
There's not much to say,
All right, they're coming back. This is the most interesting part. This is a nice shot of Miami.
Yeah, I love Miami.
This is honestly the most interesting part so far.
Great Cuban food in Miami.
Yeah, definitely.
Welcome back to tonight's NBC News Republican presidential debate. Once again,
Are
here's
we ever
Salem
going to get
Radio's Hugh Hewitt.
to abortion and women's rights?
Hopefully.
When I talk to voters every day, they all say that the border is a top issue. It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean 2 million people who crossed illegally last year. It can mean more than 150 arrests of people on the terror watch list. It can mean the burden on states.
I don't get this whole terror watch list thing. They caught them. That's a good thing.
Exactly. You know, there have been studies on this. What group since 9/11 has engaged in more deadly terrorist attacks?
Americans.
And which segment of Americans? The right wing, the Christian nationalists, the Ku Klux Klan, the neo-Nazis, far and away are the biggest source of terrorism in the U.S. It's not people streaming across the border. In fact, the study showed none. There were no examples of an illegal group of illegal migrants committing acts of terrorism. Zero.
Right.
The Mexican cartels, if you remember the path, the precursors come from China, then they are manufactured in Mexican labs, and then the Mexican cartels bring them across our border.
No, they don't bring them across. They bring them in the illegal crossings in ships and planes. It's not these migrants who are bringing drugs.
Correct.
The military-grade technology is a backup, making sure that we not only stop 70,000 deaths in the last 12 months because of fentanyl, it also allows us to deal with the human trafficking travesty that is entering in our country in the same path. If we are going to deal effectively with 100,000 overdose deaths in our country and the 70,000 that is directly linked to fentanyl, we have to deal with our ports of entry and deal with our southern border.
And what are you going to do?
Well, he actually said points of entry.
Yes, he said it.
That's the first time a Republican has ever said that, I think.
It's the first time I've heard it. Of course, it was half a sentence.
Yeah.
They didn't tell us what he's going to do with the ports of entry.
Right.
Or even what he's going to do with the southern border.
Right. Stephen G. says, hi, sir.
90% of the fentanyl that is seized in the United States is seized at ports of entry. We don't
We
know
still have
what's coming
100
in.
people hanging with us. That's
Still
great.
got a hundo.
United States Attorney, you've taken on cartels. Can it really be done quickly? What would you do as president?
It can be done quickly in two ways, Hugh, on fentanyl. The first
We're now
is exactly as
an hour and a half into the debate, and the border has been a huge issue for Republicans, for Republicans. And it took them an hour and a half to ask a single question about the border. That's just astounding.
Day one, I would sign an executive order that would send the National Guard to partner with Customs and Border Patrol, both at ports of entry and at the open ports of our border. Customs and Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed. There's 200,000 encounters a month over the last 11 months. We simply do not have the man and woman power at the border to be able to deal with it. And so dealing with both law enforcement, and you're right, we have done this, we can do this, but we got to give them the tools to do it, and technology is one of the biggest tools that we don't have enough of at the ports of entry. Now, we also need to lower demand
ports of entry again
in this country.
Another half
And
sentence.
the way to lower demand is to start treating people again. You know, we started to do this before COVID, and we haven't done enough of it. And for every family out there tonight who has lost a loved one to fentanyl or to any other type of opioid overdose, what you know is all you want is a chance for them to win their lives back. When I'm President of the United States, we're going to call this...
They're all missing the boat on opiates and fentanyl.
Okay.
They're all claiming somehow you can stop it from coming in. A, you can't, and B, if you do, it'll just be manufactured here in the United States in labs. You are not going to deal with the drug problem. We've known this for decades until you deal with the demand. As long as people in the U.S. want it and are willing to pay for it, someone will supply it. And they haven't touched the real problem. You know, they've made up this idea that somehow we can seal off our ports of entry, our borders, stop all this from coming in. A, that's wrong, and B, domestic suppliers will just step in anyway.
Salt in the wounds is that these elites in D.C. don't give a damn about what's going on in this country. They don't care that we have tens of thousands of opioid deaths, that the fentanyl's pouring in. They are not taking the type
Washington elites.
We're declaring it a national emergency on day one. I'm sending U.S. military to the border. I'm going to stop the invasion cold. I am going to deport people who came illegally. And I'm even going to build the border wall and have Mexico pay for it like Donald Trump promised. How are you going to do it?
Yeah, Mexico's paying for the border wall. Wow. Big news. That should be the headline of this debate.
I'm having deja vu.
Yes, Mexico is paying.
Terrorist organizations or something similar to that. And we're going to authorize the use of deadly force. We're going to have maritime operations to interdict precursor chemicals going into Mexico.
So, you know, we're going to build up all this military, fight 3 wars, and then have our military also go to the border. You know?
That's a great point. It's like, how the hell are you going to do all that? How are you going to pay for all that?
Right.
If, Ambassador Haley, if the United States uses special forces in Mexico without prior notice to the Mexican allies to our south, what would your colleagues at the United Nations think about that?
I don't care what my colleagues at the United Nations think. What I'll tell you is, first of all, you have to go to the source. We have lost more Americans in the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq wars combined. We lost 75,000 Americans last year. Go to the source. It is the reason why we'll continue to say we will end all normal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans. You watch how quick that flow stops. The second thing is we'll send special operations in to take out the cartels.
You know, they want to grow the economy, right? And, you know, have this big boom. We will plunge into recession if we stop all our trade with China.
Well, she's talking specifically about the fentanyl.
No, she's saying we're going to stop all our trade with China until they stop fentanyl. If we, and you know, they've all been talking about stopping all our trade with China. We would suffer vastly more than China if we did that.
That is the way we'll deal with the border. Those are the things that we have to do going forward. But I do agree with Chris. One of the first things that we have to do is really focus on mental health and addiction centers.
Okay.
It is something that is
finally
needed in our
about
country
demand,
terribly because we don't deal with.
How often have Republicans supported spending money on mental health and addiction centers? Never.
Special forces in Mexico, shoot them stone cold dead at the border?
One thing I just want to say, and how we're talking about this issue is, you know, like Ron, I've actually met many parents across this country who have lost their kids to laced pharmaceuticals that have fentanyl in them. The only thing I would ask, Ron, I think you'd be on the same page with me on this. Let's not even call that an overdose. Right. That is not an overdose. That is poisoning. If you put that fentanyl in a Big Mac, we would not call that an overdose. You'd call it what it is. It's closer to bioterrorism. And I say that because as it uniquely relates to this crisis, that does warrant more aggressive means to deal with it. So So there's a new presidential election in Mexico in 2024. People may not be aware of that. It's going to be someone other than Obrador, who has been a disaster in Mexico. I think he's even mentioned
Republicans, more war on drugs.
Yes.
So, war in Iran, war in Israel, war in Ukraine, war in Taiwan, war at the southern border, war on drugs. That's 6 wars they're trying to wage.
And cutting the deficit and cutting taxes.
Right.
What we need to do is stop using our military to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when we're short right here at home. Get serious about protecting this border. And then the other thing that hasn't been discussed is the northern border. I'm the only candidate on the stage, as far as I'm aware,
number 7.
who has actually visited the northern border. There was enough fentanyl that was captured just on the northern border last year to kill 3 million Americans. So we got to just skate to where the puck is going.
I can just see what Saturday Night Live would do with this, except nobody cares.
Well, look, if fentanyl's coming across the northern border, that's a problem. But again, border wars are not the way to solve it. I mean,
no, how long have we been fighting the drug war to no end?
Right.
Talk about spending trillions of dollars to no end. The drug war has done nothing.
In Ohio and Virginia, following earlier wins in states like Kansas and Kentucky.
Finally.
Governor DeSantis first.
An hour and 40 minutes in.
For Republicans on this issue.
Something people care
Well, I
about.
stand for a culture of life, and I understand that it's important that everyone gets a shot. I'm reminded of a story about a young mother who was struggling in Jamaica about 45 years ago. She was counseled to not have a baby because she was poor, baby wouldn't have opportunity, and she came close to have an abortion, but she decided to have the baby, born poor in Jamaica. And the reason I know that story is because that baby girl ended up emigrating to the state of Florida, becoming a lawyer and a judge.
Like a year.
And I appointed her to the Florida Supreme
stale.
Court in August of 2022. We're better off when everybody counts. We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different. Texas is not going to do it the same as New Hampshire. Iowa's not necessarily going to do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up. You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause, they have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to understand how to do that. But let's just be clear. The Democrats have taken a position. They will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
All right, Governor DeSantis.
So we need to reverse all these losses, but I kind of missed how they were going to do that. Since people really don't want the government telling women what to do with their reproductive lives. It's not a matter of a better political strategy. It's a matter of what the American people really want.
Because my husband Michael was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children, so I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, when you look post-Roe, a wrong was made right. They took it out of the hands of unelected justices and they put it in the hands of the people. And now we're seeing states vote. And what I'll tell you is, as much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there are some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that. There's some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but the people decided. But when it comes to the federal law, which is what's being debated here, be honest, it's going to take 60 Senate votes, a majority of the House, and a president to sign it. So no, we haven't had 60 Senate votes in over 100 years. We might have 45 pro-life senators. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these state laws. So let's find consensus. Let's agree on how we can ban late-term abortions. Let's make sure we encourage adoptions and good quality adoptions. Let's make sure we make contraception accessible. Let's make sure that...
But those things aren't mutually exclusive.
Of course not.
You can teach sex ed. You can make contraception available. You can promote adoption, and you can also have a pro-choice.
Of course. Meanwhile, Republicans are in the courts trying to restrict access to contraception.
Senator Scott, I'd like you to weigh in. How do you see the path forward, and what do you make of what Ambassador Haley just said? Do you see this as a consensus issue?
Well, I'm 100% pro-life. I have had 100% pro-life voting record. I would certainly, as President of the United States, have a 15-week national limit I would not allow states like
That 15-week limit really went over well in Virginia, didn't it?
Yeah.
up until the day of birth. I certainly wouldn't not allow for governors, former governor, Democratic governor of Virginia, who talked about infanticide. We need a 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit. 47 out of 50 countries in Europe agree with a 15-week limit. I would challenge both Nikki and Ron to join me at a 15-week limit. It is in our nation's best interest, and frankly, I think it's unethical and immoral to allow for abortions up until the day of birth. We have an opportunity in this nation to stop that reckless behavior from states like California, New York, and Illinois. I'd go a step further. In my parents' plan, we start by talking about funding, block granting resources.
So he's, the candidate of freedom and opportunity, and he wants the federal government dictating reproductive care for women. Whatever the number of weeks is, it's the federal government telling women how to deal with their own reproductive lives.
Support a 15-week federal limit.
I would support anything that would pass because that's what would save more babies and support more moms. But you have to be honest with the American people, and I appreciate that Tim keeps calling me out for this. But Tim, there was a bill last year. Lindsey Graham sponsored it. You didn't even co-sponsor the bill. And then when you first were interviewed on this, when you ran, you wouldn't even say you were for 15 weeks.
Haley's making the mistake again, going after Tim Scott. He might be 5% in the polls. She gets nothing out of going after Tim Scott and Ramaswamy. Nothing. Big mistake.
Push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
Let me go to Mr. Ramaswamy. Would you support a 15-week federal ban, and what is the path forward on this issue?
I just wanted to say, I think Nikki Haley did invoke being honest, and I at least want to give credit to Tim Scott. He's honest about where he stood, and I think you should be honest, not making a political calculus, but to say, if a bill is served up, would you sign it? Here's my view on this. Speaking as a man, they say men have trouble speaking on this issue. I don't think we need to be that way. It was my home state of Ohio, I'm upset about this, yesterday, that passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing. The Republicans did not have an alternative amendment or vision on the table. I know Ohio. I was born, raised, and I lived there. It's representative of the country. If in the state of Ohio we talked about access to contraception, adoption, and also here's the missing ingredient in this movement, sexual responsibility for men. We live in an era of reliable genetic...
We're back to this abstinence education, which has exactly the opposite
Listen,
effect.
He's not saying that. Hold on.
All in this together. It's not men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And I come back to that case that Clarence Thomas spoke of. A pregnant woman walking down the street. She's assaulted. The unborn child dies in that assault. You find me one person in this country who says that that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. You won't find one. That says we share the same instincts on this issue, but we require, I believe, a different generation of leadership
thank you.
to actually lead us forward and unite the country on this with honesty.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy. Governor Christie, as you know, federal limits are important to a lot of Republicans. Where do you stand on this issue, and what is the path forward for Republicans?
For 50 years, conservative lawyers have been arguing that the federal government should have absolutely nothing to do with this issue constitutionally because it's nowhere in the Constitution. And then Dobbs comes and we finally gain...
There are a lot of things that aren't in the Constitution that the federal government does, right?
Most of the things the federal government does aren't in the Constitution.
The states from doing what they need to do, and let's go right to some type of federal ban at a certain number of weeks. And people on the stage have been all over the place, 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 12, 6. Look, the Frowners were really smart. And this is an issue that should be decided in each state. And I trust the people of this country, state by state, to make the call for themselves. Now, that's going to lead to a lot of divergence. In Oklahoma, you can't get an abortion unless the life of the mother is at risk. In my home state of New Jersey, it goes up to 9 months that you get an abortion. I find that morally reprehensible. But that is what the people of our state have voted for. And we should not short-circuit that process until every states' people have the right to weigh in on it. But here's the bigger issue, Kirsten. The bigger issue is, and Tim began to touch on this, we're not pro-life for the whole life. To be pro-life for the whole life means that the life of a 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup is precious, and we should get treatment for her to restore her life.
The red states that ban abortions are the worst states when it comes to health care for mothers and children. The worst states when it comes to child care. The worst states when it comes to access to contraception.
We're going to take a final break, and when we come back, we'll hear from all of you with your closing statements. This is the NBC News Report.
All right, closing statements.
All right, do we have any questions? We still have quite a big audience hanging with us.
McKinley Cardwell says, how do we, as the subscriber community, get you on MSNBC Morning Joe? It would be great to see your counter argument to David Axelrod's opinion about Joe Biden needing to drop out. Well, I said it in the chat. Grow this channel. Share the videos where we talk about it. Go on their social media. Try to, convince them to have Allan on. Right?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
You're the media maven.
Saint Grace is here, Dad.
All right, Grace.
Patrick wants to know, would you ever go on Joe Rogan, Dad?
Sure. The one thing, I would go on Joe Rogan. Why not? What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, you should.
Yeah, big audience.
I don't.
And no one ever shuts me up.
Gotta.
Being teaching professor for 50 years, I don't know how to shut up.
Kevin asked, does last night's election give any signal for 2024?
It's very hard to draw comparisons between off-year elections and presidential elections. But it certainly, as I've been saying so many times, it does show, how misleading the polls and the pundits are and why you should pay no attention to them whatsoever.
Good answer, sir. All right, guys. You can ask questions. We're on a commercial break. Throw your questions out to this man. We've been on for 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Wow, that's pretty good for someone my age.
It's odd. It's odd. I didn't really realize this when we started. It is hard to be on camera for 2 straight hours. It takes a lot of energy.
Almost 2.5 hours, yeah.
Joel Lopez, do you believe RFK Jr. will have a significant effect on the third party key?
It's possible. It's still too early to tell. And I think a lot of the support he's getting now is just the name and, people thinking, maybe we want an alternative to Biden. But once it becomes real, everything could change. So I'm holding my opinion on that.
Is North Carolina's gubernatorial seat guaranteed to flip red since he's term limited?
It's going to be tough. Statewide elections in North Carolina have been turning red, but, as your mom, my wife Karen Strickler says, never underestimate the power of the abortion issue and women's right to control their own health care and reproductive lives.
Nathan E. asks, if Biden is reelected and then legalized weed in his second term, would that count as a major policy change?
I'd have to see. It's possible.
It's possible.
As you know, I hate to answer hypotheticals, and I don't.
Yeah. Do you believe that corporate donors have also been a serious threat to our country's democracy?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, some of the most pernicious Supreme Court decisions have been talk about what's not in the Constitution and what's not strict construction, despite all the protests of conservatives, is the notion that money is speech. And once that was established back in the 70s in Buckley v. Vallejo, it's, no holds barred in big corporate contributions, a lot of it in dark money. So we don't even know where the money is coming from.
Will Biden be able to get the primary contest key with Phillips and Williamson in the mix?
Absolutely. I don't see either one of them, getting a third of the primary or delegate vote.
The debate is back.
I can hardly wait.
It's almost over, though. That's the good news.
That's the good part. I'm just getting the closing statements.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back, everyone.
With a lot of plans and policy.
2 hours for a debate. We know there are other major issues that are important to Republican primary voters.
He said only 2 hours?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
And, of course, nothing on guns, nothing on crime, nothing on climate change, really nothing basic on the economy.
Choice to tackle these important issues. You each have a minute. Senator Scott, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
There's a crisis that is growing in our nation, and that crisis is cultural and spiritual. We need a renewal, a great awakening. We should reject the left's valueless, faithless, fatherless society. We should
Fatherless?
Fatherless?
patriotism.
Maybe he's talking about God as the father.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Stop choosing victimhood and start choosing victory. We should stop kneeling in protest and start kneeling in prayer.
Is it possible to be more empty and more offensive at the same time?
That's a good question.
That's a really good question.
If you take out a loan, you pay it back. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. And if God made you a man, you play sports against men. I do not just want to.
Audience, please.
I do not just.
Shut
That's
up.
what got the big clap.
Yeah.
The trans sports debate. Interesting.
Together to win the war for our Christian conservative values that changed my life.
Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, you have.
That's why I'm asking.
He just ignores the fact that Christianity is one religion in America, one of many.
And the number of Christians percentages is way on the decline.
The gift to be an American. And I'm running for president of the United States because I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing the division. I'm tired of seeing the anger. And I can see in the eyes of Americans their exhaustion. Their exhaustion from the petty, personal politics that have taken over this country over the last number of years. I'm running for president to be a president of consequence, to do the big things, to make sure that America's role in the world stays number one, that we stand up for our friends and allies around the world, and we stand up for what we believe in right here at home. And it's not to eliminate our differences. Our differences has always been our strength as a country, not our weakness. But you can't truly say you love America unless you're ready to open up your heart to every American.
True.
I'm going to open up my heart to every American as president, and I will make sure that I return honesty, integrity to the Oval Office. We deserve and should accept nothing less.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Ramaswamy now. Your 1 minute.
Christie is pretty good, but irrelevant.
Yeah.
A war right here at home. It's a war not between black and white or Democrat and Republican. It's between those of us who believe in our founding ideals and love this country and a fringe minority who hates the United States of America.
Oh, my God.
And I think it's going to take a commander-in-chief to lead us to victory in that war.
We just heard Chris Christie talking about embracing our divisions, and now we have this guy inflaming them.
Yep. We have to attack the people who hate America. The incels in this country who hate America.
I'll keep us out of World War III and then revive national pride in this country. I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up.
Back into the deep end of the pool, right?
So we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else.
All right,
just
Mr.
tell us the
Ramaswamy,
truth so we can have an honest
time is
debate.
up. Ambassador.
What a loony, dude.
I couldn't make this up, could I?
No.
Thank you. The world is on fire. We have a war in Europe. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got China on the march. It is very important that we know how to defend our freedoms and how to defeat terrorism and socialism. We have to know the
Socialism?
difference
Where did
between
that
good
come
and
from?
evil. We have to know the difference between right and wrong. We need to know that a strong America doesn't start wars, a strong America prevents wars. And the
True.
way we can focus on that is to make sure we go back to the soul of America and be strong and proud again. And we can't do that. We can't win the fights of the 21st century with politicians from the 20th century. We have to move forward, and we can do this. I know we can do this. So join our movement. Go to NikkiHaley.com, and we will
Not offensive, but disappointing. You know, uninspiring. I expected more from her.
Governor DeSantis, you're closing. You have 1 minute.
We must reverse our country's decline, and that is going to require leadership. I will take the hits, I will take the arrows, I will take the barbs, because it's not about me.
Such a tough guy.
Yeah, really. Tough guy with those heels, you know?
Fight for you. I am going to win for you and your family, and I'm going to lead this country's revival.
Isn't that what Donald Trump said? So much winning, you'd be tired of winning.
Put service above self as president. As the father of 3 young kids, I'm going to ensure that this country is left to the next generation in better shape than we found it. And as the governor of Florida, I delivered on all my promises, and you can trust me to deliver for you as the president of the United States. I am asking for your vote. I'll be a nominee that will be able to win the election. I will be a leader you can be proud of, and as your president, I will not let you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you.
He just went. He went. Yeah.
God bless us one and all. It's over.
Thanks. That's the real blessing.
The next line says, if the audience can hold their applause. That didn't work out. But anyway, for just a few more seconds, I'll ask you to just hold the applause. On behalf of my fellow moderators, I want to thank the candidates for their time and for this spirited debate. Really good, deep conversation, and we appreciate you all being here. Thank you as well to our wonderful hosts here at the Adrienne Arsh Performing Arts Center. On behalf of the Republican National Committee and all of us at NBC News, good night, everyone, from Miami.
We have any final questions?
All right. The debate is over.
And the winners are Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
Yeah.
By far.
Yeah. No doubt. And
the most disappointing is Nikki Haley, and the nuttiest is Ramaswamy.
Yeah.
And the emptiest is Tim Scott.
Very true. Ron DeSantis kind of faded away, as we said earlier.
Yeah, he started out strong and then kind of did fade away. I don't think he hurt himself, but he certainly didn't do much. No one really helped themselves. I don't see the needle for these folks moving at all.
No, not at all. I don't think polls change.
No, I can't imagine.
Preacher Bryant. We have a preacher in the chat.
Wow, a preacher. We have captains. We have presidents.
They say, love these debate live streams. The YouTube voters got it wrong for not having Allan and Sam stream the first debate in Milwaukee. Okay, so he likes our debate streams.
We picked up our pace, yeah.
Salkin. Miles Wolf asked, what about Christie's performance? It was good.
I like Christie, but he's irrelevant.
These are totally irrelevant. The Republican Party, he's so disconnected from the Republican Party. It's hard to even call him a Republican sometimes.
Yeah, he's irrelevant. Too bad. I did think he probably did the best, but doesn't matter.
Mohammed says, October 2023 was the hottest month in recorded history. They didn't even discuss it. Yeah, there's no doubt.
Not a word about the most serious existential threat to our planet. In fact, just the opposite. Yeah. They want to burn up the planet with fossil fuels.
Salkin13 asks, do any of these candidates set themselves up for 2028?
No.
Not really.
Not really. I don't see
Haley. Maybe Haley.
Maybe. But boy, she was very disappointing. I thought this would be her wheelhouse.
Yeah, I agree.
With a focus on foreign policy. And she instead got sidetracked into arguments with Scott and Ramaswamy and talking about things no one really heard of. She did much better on foreign policy in the last debate.
Yeah, I agree. Who do you think drops out next?
Christie and Scott.
Yeah, probably. All right, guys, any more questions? We still got 92 people watching, so if not...
Yeah, well, this old man has been on for 2.5 hours.
I know, it's been a long time.
Yep.
It was draining.
It's been draining.
All right, we'll give you guys another minute or so to throw in questions if there's no more questions.
And are we doing one tomorrow?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
You want to?
Maybe. I don't see why not. Our regular Thursday. What does our audience think?
I don't know.
Hard to tell.
Yeah.
All right. I'll take one more question.
Matt Sheridan says, you guys are a blast. Thanks for the show. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
It's been a fun stream, says Vaylander. Everybody's saying yes, do it. All
right, we need to remind people to like us, subscribe, contribute.
We have 105 people watching, only 77 likes. So if you could subscribe, That would be fantastic. That would be so fantastic. Maybe tomorrow we'll talk more about the election.
Yeah, we didn't talk much about the election.
Yeah. All right. With that, we will say good night.
Good night.
Quick shout out to the people still watching. Joel Lopez of A-Lander, Jack Davis, Matt Sheridan, Miles Wolf, XRP Pharaoh 9, Jack Davis, Ross Goldberg, Jose. Thank you for sticking with us for
2.5 hours. That's pretty good.
Good night.
Good night.
Sleep well. I guess we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.